Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Addicts. We are on season 3, episode 12. Um, my guest today is Christopher Lee Jansen. Um, you're an author, an investigator, researcher, medium, a little bit of everything there, Christopher. Uh,
I have a lot
so
going on.
my first quote. So yeah, but that's good. That's a good thing, I guess. So we'll start out like we always do. Uh, just introduce yourself to anybody who don't know you.
Well, as Kent just mentioned, I wear a lot of different hats. Actually, I'm almost always wearing a hat. You always see it tilted to the side. There's a reason for that, but that's another story. I do have my first book coming out in August. It's going to coincide with this year's ISS Con at the Indiana State Sanatorium, as the events of the book are based on a real life experience I had at Billy Creek Village, which is just down the street from the Indiana State Sanatorium. But other than that, I am a psychic medium. I do readings in Ohio and around the Midwest area. I'm a psychic reader at the Magical Druid in Clintonville, Ohio. I'm the house psychic at the Fairfield County Infirmary, and I'm one of the co-founders of Crooked Path Paranormal. So those are the biggest pieces that make up the puzzle for me right now.
Yeah, I was actually talking about you earlier today. I was on the phone with Kenneth Drake, and I was telling him that you was going to be on the podcast, and he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "I know him." He's like, "I think I'm going to get to see him later this year." So I guess in this field, I guess everybody knows each other for better or for worse. I guess. But,
that is very true.
We're going to start out. We're having Facebook connection issues. So that's what I'm doing. If everybody's wondering what I'm doing. So we're live on YouTube, and I'll just have to share everywhere else later. It's a Facebook glitch apparently, because I keep getting a message from StreamYard saying Facebook connection issues on both Get Haunted and my page. So who knows? Who knows? Now it looks like we're connected on Get Haunted. So who knows? It's Facebook. There's always something going on with Facebook,
Always.
We'll just share it later. So yep. So let me forget about the technical difficulties and get back to the show here. There we go. And then I got to do that one so my agent gets a shout out. There we go. All right. So let's start out. Like you said, you do wear a lot of hats. So let's start from the beginning. What got you into the paranormal?
I've always gravitated toward the unknown and toward things that, okay, I'll put it this way. I've always gravitated toward the darkness. I'm much more comfortable in a dark room than I am a well-lit room, and I've been that way my entire life. I was the kid that wanted to hang out at the abandoned mausoleum down the street. When I was 10 years old, I had a dream.
I actually feel that.
So when I was 10 years old, I had a dream that a very close friend of our family's died. And she was a healthy 43-year-old woman. There was no reason anybody should have been thinking about her dying. Within 3 days, she was dead. And I remember being 10 years old at her funeral and sensing that she was standing there and talking to me. So 10 years old was a really pivotal moment for me on my journey.
Okay, we're back. I think it's this weather we're having down here where I'm at. I don't know, West Kentucky. If you don't like the weather, stick around for a couple hours. It'll change. we try to do all the seasons at one time down here. For real. All right, so so I actually relate to that. I don't call myself a medium. I call myself, I guess, like clairvoyant or whatever term. I'm not big on terms, but yeah, I don't remember a time. So my first book just came out a few months ago, and the title of my first book is actually "Don't Buy Generic Batteries," and it's probably not a demon. Memorals of a Paranormal Investigator, and uh, and uh, and my friend Aaron G. Thompson wrote my introduction. But when the first sentence of chapter one, when I start writing, actually says that most people's first memory is their first bike or their first Christmas or their first home run in Little League. My first memory is the first time I saw an apparition when I was 5 years old at my grandmother's house. So, and early on, and still mostly now, the way that I'm communicating with is dreams. Maybe that's normal, but that's mostly how I get communicated with. And I was, and like you, I was that kid who wanted to. I went on my first investigation at 12 years old, and and uh, and the only thing I had was a tape recorder, and not even like the tape recorders we have now. Like one of the old library, and a tape recorder, a flashlight, and a pen and a notebook. That's all I had. And at 12 years old, and then so that was 1986. For those people out there that's keeping track, yes, I am old, but that's okay. So yeah, I relate to all of that. So I got guidelines here to help me make sure I stay within time frame, because I go over a lot. But it don't make any difference right now because I'm not connected to get on it, so Rob can't get mad at me anyway. So
perfect.
So let's talk about. Okay, so obviously you kind of already answered this question, but just to revisit it, when did you realize that you had medium abilities?
10 years old, the first time I physically saw someone who I knew was deceased standing there and carrying on a conversation with me. That was also right around the same time my journey into tarot started.
Do you believe? Okay, so not to me, and obviously not to you, but there's a certain sect out there that whatever mediums or whatever. So, do you believe we're born with those abilities, or do you think people can develop them? Do you think it's just something that we have, or do you think it can be developed?
I do believe everybody has the potential to do that type of work. Some make a conscious decision to step into it. Even if something happens that's a catalyst for them being launched into it, there's still a moment of consciousness as to whether or not I'm going to pursue this. I very much think it can be something that's developed. I've worked with people for years and years on developing their abilities and teaching them how to control and to connect. So it's definitely something that can be developed. I think everybody's got the potential. Not everybody chooses to be a part of that world.
Okay. All right. So, just so everybody knows, I feel like I have to give a weather report because we keep going in and out. We have a severe windstorm, severe wind advisory right here where I'm at. They said that. So if you see us leave and come back, we're not doing that. That's the wind. That's not me. So, but yeah. So I agree with the same thing. I tell people, especially, I think all kids, as kids, we have those abilities, and we even realize we do. But for some reason, as we get older, either consciously or unconsciously, we don't develop them, and we just forget about them. I don't know if it's because society tells us, "Oh, that's not normal" or whatever. But I do think that you can you can relink into those abilities. I was talking to uh, my friend Daryl Monson on her about a month ago now, and we were talking about things. I was sharing a personal experience, and then he because me and him we have a location that we investigated in common. There's a place that not everybody's been to, so we were talking about that. And then he was like, "Well, I don't have abilities." I was like, "Don't say that, Daryl." I was like, I was like, I'm a firm believer. If if you keep doing this as an investigator, you redevelop your senses, and that's what it really is. You might not have it as strong as other people, but you're going to have something. So yeah, and so and we have a location, and of course lots of friends in common. The location that we have in common that we both been to investigated is actually one of my favorite, and that's Ernie and Denise's house. The Ditto house.
Absolutely. It's a great location, and they're great people.
They are. They are. We were actually the last team to get to investigate it. While they're taking the break. They said eventually we'll let people investigate it again, but they're like, we got so much stuff going on, we need to take a break and focus on Ernie and Denise. So, but it is a great location, great history.
It is.
So, so let's talk. So let's talk about hat number 2. I guess let's talk a little bit about the Reiki Master, and so for the people. So explain what that is for the people that don't understand what that is.
Reiki is a form of energy work or energy healing that taps into the universal life energy that's around all of us and uses that energy for focused healing with intention. And when you get to a master level,
that's a lot better than I could explain it.
As you work through the levels, I mean, Reiki level 1 allows you to be able to, or opens the door for you to be able to practice Reiki, be a Reiki practitioner. As you go to level 2, you start learning different techniques, like how to work with Reiki from a distance. And then you get up to a master level where you can offer the attunement process for other people, for them to practice Reiki. That's a part of my work.
I think that's a very good explanation. Definitely better than I could have done. So I've actually been suggested that I try that because I suffer. I mean, it's public information. Just a lot of people don't know. I suffer from a Chiari malformation, and I'm actually, and so like medically speaking, there's no cure. So, so my neurologist actually told me that the only thing they can do really is make me try to have the quality of life I want to have. So anyway, a friend of ours, I guess, actually recommend that I give it a try. I haven't yet, but I'm definitely looking into it. I just haven't found anybody down here by me that can help me, and that's Sarah is the one who suggests I look into that. And so yeah. So how does energy work? How does that connect to the other things you do? How does that connect to the paranormal?
Well, living people aren't the only ones in need of energy work. Sometimes the spirits of the deceased are in need of energy work. Sometimes a physical building is in need of energy work. Sometimes the land is in need of energy work. So when I go to investigate a location, I'm assessing what exactly needs energy work, if anything. It's not always a physical person. Sometimes it's a spirit, a land, or a building.
I think that's important, and I'm glad you said it. Of course, all this is a pseudoscience or whatever, but I guess the most prominent theory is spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. their energy. There's their energy. And even like Einstein has said that energy doesn't just disappear; it's always around. So yeah, so energy is energy. So obviously, and a lot of my follow up questions, you just basically answered all in one thing. But I'll go ahead and. Which is good. That's fine. That's fine. But I mean,
I'm Sam
so one of the
Psychic. Maybe
questions.
I anticipated the next question.
There you go. I mean, one of the questions, and it's one of the ones you answered there, but I'm glad you answered it. Is can energy calm activity? And obviously, it can if the location needs energy healing, that calms the activity. So
Right. And I don't go to a place looking to do that. I don't ever go to a place looking to change the landscape, looking to rid a place of its spirits. That's the last thing I want to do. That's not my job when I go somewhere.
right,
But
right,
sometimes along the
yeah,
way, energy work can help a spirit's time there in that plane without, to me, changing the haunting.
yeah. I mean, and that's so there's a mess. I don't know if it's the para pop culture or what it is, but people assume for whatever reason if a spirit's here, they're trapped here or whatever, and it's really actually the opposite. If a spirit's here, they choose to be here. It could be a subconscious thing, really, but if they're here, they choose to be here for some reason. They're not usually trapped. Now, I've seen a more powerful spirit trap a weaker spirit, but still there's so some places that you go to now. Unfortunately, we're in the pay to investigate era of the paranormal field, which is fine. Everybody's got to make money, I guess. But but what you have to me, the question is when you get into that, what's morally right and what's just taking advantage of people. I think if a location is charging $1,700 to $2,000, they're just lining their pocket. I don't think it really has anything to do with the field. But I'm getting off my subject here. So some of these locations you go to now, um, when you sign your little waiver, you have to sign. There's some of them that say that you can't cross over a spirit. First of all, that's right. I can't cross over a spirit anyway. I can help guide them, but I can't cross them over. But to me, I'm getting to a question. Trust me, Christopher. So to me, that's a moral issue. I mean, I if a spirit comes to me during an investigation, and they tell me they want to cross over, I'm not going to say no, you're trapped. The owner of this building says you can't leave. So to me, that's a moral thing. I mean, to me, if you really break it down, how's that different than slavery? You know what I'm saying? So what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I can count the number of times I've actually gone to release someone or help someone cross on one hand. It's just not something I do. And I have had conversations with location owners in those instances where I've said, this is the situation here. This is what I'm working with. This is what I'm feeling. If you'll let me, I would like to do something about this. And more often than not, I've gotten a positive response. But I think a lot of these people too, when I'm having this conversation, it's not usually with someone that doesn't previously know me. So knowing my reputation, I think, helps. If I'm coming to someone and having that conversation, you've got someone here that really shouldn't be here. They really need to move on. I have the conversation infrequently enough that I think I get a good response when I do have it. But those who are purposely looking to trap their spirits, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right at all. I don't think most location owners come at it from that angle. I think most truly do take care of their spirits.
I did. I can count on one finger how many times I've been to a location where I'm like, that's not the way they're not treating the spirits right. They're not treating the location right, and and that's saying a lot because I've been on over 700 investigations. So yeah, so I agree with that. I think most of them are treat their spirits, and I mean realistically, the vast majority of location owners used to be investigators, so they kind of understand that too. And but I also tell them when I run into that situation, I'm like, you realize most of the time when you set one spirit free, another one usually replaces it. It's not like so. But yeah, let's move on for that because that's one of those things. I don't think there's enough instances that it's really worth much airtime. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's talk about a little bit about a hypnotist being a hypnotist. Yeah, I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, but that's okay. So I've actually been hypnotized one time in my life. I was I was 18 and I was 19. I was 19 and I was at Fort Sam Houston. I was in the Army at that time, and we had at that time a renowned hypnotist visit the troops. It was one of those WSO tour things,
Mm-hmm.
and I volunteered. To be hypnotized because I was a skeptic. Um, I was a skeptic, so I volunteered, and I had a positive experience. So my first question is, how does that tie into everything else you're doing? You got like everything going on. So how does that tie into being a medium and being a Ricky? I mean, what's the glue there?
The main things I use hypnosis for are helping people with weight loss or smoking cessation or past life regression. And the past life regression seems to tie in a lot. People have come to me and said, I've been to this location. I feel like I've been there before. I feel like I have a connection there. And then we get into the past life regression. I've actually done that for a number of people out at the Fairfield County Infirmary who feel they have a connection there. I've done a lot of my own past life work too. Mostly it's through the past life work.
Somebody tried to call me when we was on the podcast. I have a friend he's at the Indiana State Sanitarium, and nobody else showed up for the tour, so he's investigating the whole location by himself. I'm like, that's cool. And for $100 he gets free reign at the sanitarium. I was like, that's cool. I'm like, my luck there'd be like 50 people show up. I'm like, you get it by yourself. So yeah, that was actually gonna be my next question. Do you use it to help people remember stuff? I mean that's usually I had a great aunt. She was actually one of the people who was hypnotized to quit smoking. So I've seen it work there. So and I worked. I was a combat medic. It was my MOS when I was in the military, but I was stationed with the MPs, and I actually saw somebody hypnotized to open up so they could identify the person that they saw, because I kept saying I couldn't remember it. So they went under and they were able to describe the person. So I went from being a skeptic of hypnotism to believing in it. So that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
And that's the reason I tell people, a lot of people are like, why, do you like taking skeptics on an investigation? And I actually do, because if I can change if I can prove to a skeptic the paranormal is real, that's the thing. I don't do very many public investigations anymore, novice investigations. I don't like that term. So, but back in the day, one. I used to host one public event a year, and I always did it at the same location. The last time I did it, it's now been 3 years. We did it at the Hotel Metropolitan in Paducah, Kentucky, and
Okay.
so the last time I did it, that's my hometown is Paducah. So I've literally investigated the Hotel Metropolitan 13 times. That's not an exaggeration. That's the actual amount of time. I think I know the building better than the ghosts do at this point. But the last time I held a public investigation there, I'm real good friends with the people, the managers from the radio station, one of the second biggest radio station down here, which is a Fergie 103. And so whenever I have an event, no matter what it is, they always advertise it for me on the radio. Well, when I was doing this public event on National Ghost Hunting Day, and the last Saturday of September, so all of a sudden they decided it would be a great idea if one of the DJs joined me on the investigation. And I was like, this probably is not a good idea. But we did it anyway. And he was a skeptic. I mean, he was like the ultimate skeptic. Like he didn't believe in anything. Like his statement when he got there is, unless the spirit touches me, I'm not going to believe anything. I'm like, well, I can't guarantee that. So, but anyway, he was so bad that the rest of his team that came with him got mad at him. And
wow.
So I don't mind I don't mind skeptics, but you still have to be somewhat open-minded. I actually try to go into every investigation as a skeptic. I want the location to prove to me there's activity. I don't want to go in there thinking there's activity, because then I may manifest it in my head. You know what I'm saying? So, but I don't even know if there's a question there. But so yeah, there is a question. So so if somebody comes up to you and says they're a skeptic, how do you handle that? Do you like skeptics? Do you like?
I'm not going to say I like or dislike them. I will invite them to have an experience. I lead a number of public events every year. I have one actually this coming weekend at the old jail in Paulding, Ohio. But the most prominent ones I do are my psychic public ghost hunts at the Fairfield County Infirmary, where everything we do is based on psychic work. I had a man last year who was a skeptic, and I invited him to come to the room we have set up as the boys' room for some of the children's spirits. And what I wanted somebody to do was to let the children draw a picture with their hands. Just sit with your eyes closed, with the pen and paper, similar to automatic writing. The intention is to draw. Because I know the children there like to draw, and this man, who's very much a skeptic, offered to do that. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the picture. He was so shaken by what came out of it that he ended up leaving early. He was very distressed. The man actually happened to be an artist, and the picture that came out was so clearly not of his influence. It wasn't him at all. It shook him so badly he left the event early. Which, I mean, that's unfortunate. I certainly didn't want the man to leave. I wanted him to have an experience, and he did. But it seemed to rattle him. He was very gore.
With the English and French languages.
Yeah, I think people don't understand how powerful something like that can be. One of the locations, this became one of my favorite locations. It's actually in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It's one of those locations. Ghost hunters did it. Blah blah blah. My good friend Jimmy Ricker from Outlaw Paranormal did it, and he's the one who's finally told me, you need to go see this location. Well, what's interesting is my backstory is my dad's family is from Carroll, Illinois, so right across the river, and so when we were kids, we either went with my grandparents. We either went to Paducah or we went to Kate, depending on which one we were. Because they were both 30 minutes away. So we went to, and they were so I grew up. I always heard about the Glenn House. I heard about the stories of the woman in white, blah blah blah. I always heard about it, but oddly, I had never got to investigate it. And then, so the first time I investigated, we got some stuff. The second time I investigated, I decided to. The most noted spirit there is the daughter, and her name is Sarah Glenn, but she goes by Sally. Well, she's the one that the most noted. So I saw her picture. The first time I went there, I saw a picture, and her picture, it was like her senior picture. It was a formal picture, you know what I'm saying? And and she was very pretty, but there was something about her eyes that connected with me for the beginning. So the second time I went there, I actually carried Sally's picture with me, and it increased the activity. It also increased that I was actually able to have an actual conversation with Sarah. Like there was a connection there, and we recorded it, EVP and everything. But I was actually talking directly to her, and she was talking directly to me. And the funny thing, she actually told me I was cute, and which is funny if you know Sally's backstory, because Sally's backstory is, lots of money. They were rich, but she got married, and because she married another person with money, because that's how things happen, So she married, and it was such a big wedding that they flew in. They didn't fly in. They had on the train. They had piano players and organ players come into Cape for the wedding, and apparently they got married for years. But Sally always wanted to be an actress.
Okay.
She always wanted to be an actress. So somehow she got the money to move to Hollywood, to go to Hollywood. They don't know how she got the money. They don't know if the family gave it to her or if she pocketed it from her husband or whatever. They don't know how. But anyway, she goes to Hollywood. And like I said, she's very pretty, very pretty. Matter of fact, if you look at her picture, she almost looks like the Black Dahlia, from the Black Dahlia murders. She has that look. That's how pretty she is.
Oh,
so
wow.
she gets to Hollywood, and she meets a married man. And she begins an affair with this married man. And she comes back to Cape Girardeau, divorces her husband, goes back to Hollywood, and she never really makes it big. She does a few smaller movies. Ends up being married like 5 or 6 times, and then ends up committing suicide in West Virginia. So,
okay.
But she's a fascinating character. So what brought the Glenn House back into the spotlight is apparently her great granddaughter, who's also named Sarah Glenn, is apparently the top adolescent paranormal fiction author. And she was writing her latest book. This has been like a decade ago now, 5 years ago now. No, it's been a decade ago, because Grant Wilson was it was the year that Grant was the lead investigator of Ghost Hunters, and Jason wasn't on there. So it's been about 10 years. And so anyway, so Sarah was writing her book, and she drew a picture of this house for the book. And she had never seen the Glenn House. So she drew this picture where her dad came in and saw the picture. And she's like, "Why did you draw a picture of my grandmother's house?" So they reached back out to the Glenn House. They were surprised they were still standing, everything. And they've actually visited a few times. And now the caretaker, who's a good friend of mine, she says that when the family's there, the spirits are all really happy and nice. As soon as they leave, it's like they get not so nice. So yeah, so So yeah, so to go on about my connection with the picture room, all that stuff. They call it the green room or whatever. So we go upstairs, and the most active rooms upstairs are her brother's room. His name was Garrett, and then the children's room. And so we were in the children's room, and we made contact with who we assume is Mr. Glenn, the father, and the person who was with me was like making contact, and he was like, "Is it okay, for us to be here?" Blah blah blah. And then he's like, Kent's carrying Sally's picture. Is that okay? Well, immediately we got a Mills voice, like an angry Mill voice, and it said, "No, that girl is mine." And then right after that, we got a female voice, and the female voice sounded protective, and the female voice said, "You leave that girl alone," talking to the guy. So that made me believe that, and I've looked into this. I haven't found enough evidence to say for sure, but I found enough to say it's probable. I'm thinking there was some abuse going on there,
Right.
So and that was all from that picture, because every other time when I didn't have that picture, we didn't have that. So so the energy that was left of that picture, the energy to me, and I could be wrong here. To me, it was her eyes. I mean, her eyes. And like I said, she was beautiful, but even her eyes in the picture looked like she was a lost soul. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Wow.
So yeah, and so yeah, it's very powerful. And I wrote a little bit about it in my first book, because my first book just came out. And, I think most people buy my book just for the title. I think, to be honest, I think most people don't even know who I am. I think they're just like, that's a cool title, because the title of my first book is "Don't Buy Generic Batteries, and It's Probably Not a Demon."
That's great. I love it.
My second book is getting ready to come out, and my second book is kind of like a manifesto, called "The Arms of the Paranormal Field," and because I'm tired, I'm just tired of the fakers, and I'm tired of the Sam and Kobe's. I'm tired of all that, So my second book is titled "It Takes More Than Yelling Demon and Wearing Skinny Jeans to Be a Paranormal Investigator."
Very nice. Well done. That's great.
Yeah. So okay, let's talk a little bit about philosophy. How's that? We'll talk about philosophy. So we kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking about energy, but let's go a little bit more in depth here. How do you personally define the paranormal?
To me, it's simply an umbrella term that can encompass a number of different facets of the unknown. I think there's many different things that fall into the realm of the unknown that can fall under the paranormal umbrella. Things that can't necessarily be explained scientifically. And to me, there's a lot more there than just ghosts and spirits. There's so many things that can't be explained scientifically, and we go out and we try to connect to these things and prove the existence of these things. Whether we get proof or not, I still don't know that we've necessarily proved an existence. So that to me is my definition for the paranormal.
Right. Well, I don't know if we've proved it exists either, but I look at that. That's my job. You know what I'm saying? That's why I keep doing this. I keep saying, I take a hybrid approach. I use the scientific, I use the religion, I use my gifts. So I use whatever, everything.
Right.
So,
I draw from.
I always.
I draw from all different places as well.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
actually just
And
had a very
I think that's why.
We actually had a very interesting conversation Friday night at the infirmary. A group of us were working through something, and somebody had suggested that a prayer needed to be said.
And so I used to tell people,
And she had insisted that I be the one to do it, to say the prayer. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. And she said, why? And I said, because I fully understand what you're getting at and why you think that needs to be done. But I am so far removed from that piece. That's not in the realm of my personal spirituality, that if I do it, I'm not going to be giving it what you need it to have. So I'm going to pass. So no, I'll bring religion into it as well. But for me to utilize that, it has to mean something to me. I'm not going to grab onto somebody else's religion. It may not have the meaning to me and try to stuff it into my investigation if I'm not behind it.
right? And I think that makes me respect you even more, because it's like, Rob says it all the time. There's no rule book to the paranormal investigating. You have people who say, you got to do this, you got to do that, but there's no rule. Only thing I ask if you're going to investigate with me is, don't provoke the spirits.
Right.
And and that's just because, I have that rule in the non-paranormal. Don't provoke my friend either. I'm not going to come over to your house and scream at you and expect a positive reaction. So why would you do that to a spirit?
Right.
So and don't fake anything. That's all I care about. That's why I tell people all the time. I was a featured guest last year at Smoky Mountain Terror. Down in the town down in Tennessee,
Mhm.
and I consider myself a nobody. I have no ego. That's just me. And so I get invited to go there, and I'm like, I'm going to be a small fish in a big pond. Nobody's going to know who I am. Blah blah blah. Well, that wasn't right, but that has nothing to do with the story. So I get down there, and so it's mostly a horror convention, but they threw a bone to the paranormal. So there's like 6 teams there. There's Outlaw Paranormal. There's me. There's SOS. There's Paranormal Theory, Paranormal Journey, and then there's Kalane, the Ghost Center. So we're all down there, and the first thing I noticed is the young men beside me, in their tight jeans and yelling demon. They are charging $60 for a picture, for a 5x8 picture, not even autographed, just a 5x8 picture. So me being me and not caring, I go over there and I call them out on that, and I'm like, I want you to understand, I'm not against making money. Obviously, I wrote the book, so I want people to buy it, and and stuff. And so I'm not against making money. I'm against taking advantage of people. And $60 for a picture is taking advantage of people. So these young men look at me and say, that's fair. That's their comment. That's fair. So to their defense, they treated me nicely and with respect the rest of the convention, professional courtesy or whatever. So to me personally, they were nice. But with that being said, I also think they were taking advantage of their fans. But
Right.
it was also explained to me, but everything happens for a reason. I will say this: the organizers figured it out too, and they will never be invited back. So if you fake stuff, eventually you're going to be caught. So
Right.
So and I don't have a problem with anybody until you make me have a problem. And to me that kind of crossed the line. The other example I get, and then I'm going to get off this because it's just that with either of our time. The other example I give is there is a team. There is a duo. They're not even a team. They're a duo, and I call them the Spice. And they the reason I have a problem with them is because they legitimately make it more difficult for real investigators, because there's locations you go to now and you can no longer go live and you can no longer release a video until it's approved by the location. And they specifically tell you it's because of Sherman Coe. And so that I have a problem with that. If you're going to fake stuff, fake stuff. If you're going yo demon, but don't make it harder for the ones of us that's actually trying to do real work. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh,
So
absolutely.
that does lead to a question. I know. So here's the question. Are you ready? And I don't ask this question to everybody. I asked this question to everybody in season 1, but we're in season 3 now. So in season 3, I only ask it to people that I respect and I actually want their opinion. So, so that should mean a little bit to you. So, so the question is, how do you think the para-pop culture, that's my word, para-pop culture, how do you think the para-pop culture has affected the field both positively and negatively?
Okay, I'm going to start with positively. I think positively, I'm going to use your word, the para-pop culture, I like that, has opened the door for so many more people to experience the paranormal. Now, do I think all of those people need to be running amok within these locations and creating chaos without knowing what they're doing? No, I don't. So opening the door for them also opens the door for hopefully them to learn how to do this the right way. The negative, I'm going to go right along with what you just said. Locations that it's now more difficult for those of us who take this seriously because of those who don't, or those who are just looking to get more and more attention, so to speak. I don't see that going away anytime soon. Those who are making it more difficult. And that to me is a big negative. But there's enough viewership that subscribes to that. There's enough that feeds that fire that I think is going to make it very difficult for that to go away.
Yeah, I mean, the people who do that, some of them are very popular. The two that I talked about, the Spice Girls and the Paranormal field, even had a movie. So what can you say? But and I agree with all that. So Sarah explained this to me. This is when she was on my show last year. She said, she's like, Kent, what you have to understand. And she's like, I understand you may get frustrated because you don't get as many likes as those people. He's like, but what you have to understand, there's still a place in the field for that, because the people who tune in to Sam and Kobe, they tune in to be entertained. They don't tune in to see what it's really like. They're not the same ones that are going to tune in to me, and that's true. That doesn't mean I like it, but it is true, so. And this is, I'm going to say this one last point, and then we're going to move on, because I get on a soapbox about that, and I don't want to. So I was at the historic Rosemont, weekend before last, and and I was posting on my page that we were going to go investigate it, and I posted something about that there was reported that there was this one spirit who tried to run guests off, and so when I got there. The curator and stuff from the location was there, and she's like, "That's not true." She's like, "I don't care about you putting that on there." She's like, "I just don't want you to be disappointed because I ain't one." And then she's like, "Where did you get that from?" And I told her where I got it from. It was a TV show and what team it was that said it. And she's like, "That explains it." She's like, "We put no faith in them." She's like, "When they were here," she's like, "That." But I agree. I agree that on the fact that it's made the field more open to people and it's made it more open to the public. I tell this story a lot. So 6-year-old me, for the people who don't know, I not only live in the Bible Belt, but I live in like the capital of the Bible Belt. We have more churches than people, I think, down here. And when I was 6 years old was when I saw my first apparition or whatever. And so I was at Cape Girardeau at the hospital visiting my granddad, and this 60-some-odd-year-old black lady who I didn't know from Job came over to me and looked at me and told me that I was going to hell and I was a tool of the devil because of my gifts. And so, and now, I still run into some of that. But if I'm at Walmart or Kroger or whatever, now I get a lot more of the, "Oh, you mean like ghost hunters?" And then you always have to hear the story about their house or their granddad's house or house has the ghost, and so at least it's opened up the communication better. So
Right.
so that's definitely a positive. So all right, we're almost out of time. So I can actually take as long as I want to, but I like to try to keep it at an hour because I value your time. So let's get a few more questions in. What is one experience that you've had that you cannot explain?
I spent a night at the Blennerhassett Hotel and Spa in West Virginia, Parkersburg. And we walked in, it was myself and a friend. And I looked at my friend and I said, "There's an old woman. She's bending down. She's picking something up off the floor. She's wearing a purple dress." And my friend is like, "What?" "I'm just telling you what I'm seeing." And every time we'd walk into that lobby, I'd get the same image. I'd say it out loud again. The third time we walked into the lobby and I expressed it, I felt like someone hit me upside the back of the head. And I went, "I'm sorry. It's a lilac dress, not a purple dress. Whatever." So we finish our night there. The next day, we're going to go across to Blennerhassett Island and see Jansen. We go in the visitors center, buy our ticket for the boat ride over. And I looked at my friend and I said, "Margaret." "What?" "I don't know. I'm just telling you, Margaret." I didn't know until we got up to the counter that the mansion belonged to Harmon and Margaret Blennerhassett. I had no idea. I also did not know that there was a Margaret in following generation. So that was a major name for that family.
Behind the assassination.
So we get to the island, take the tour, find out that there was a fire at the mansion. They lost everything. They ended up leaving the state. They ended up landing in New York. And a couple of the family members were in these poor, decrepit graves. And they ended up finding the graves, contacting the island, and having the bodies exhumed, moving them back to be buried on the island. That's great. So we finish our tour. We drive back home. I'm in Lancaster at the Fairfield County Infirmary. This young woman walks into my room and she says, "I'd really like it if you could connect to my grandmother. She passed away and things just weren't right. I need to know that some things are as they should be." And I just looked at her and I said, "Do you remember your grandmother wearing a purple dress?" And she said, "No." And I rolled my eyes and I said, "Fine, what about a lilac dress?"
The officers know that the order to
And she said, "Yes."
could be only minutes away.
And now I'm just mad. I'm like, what's the difference between lilac and purple? Come on. So I said to her, "What's the significance of finding, and I had to think, what is it that she was picking up off the floor? And it hit me, a bobby pin. I said to her, what's the significance of bobby pins for you? Because remember, I'd seen the old lady picking something up off the ground. And she said, whenever I find bobby pins dropped on the ground, I know that Grandma's been around. Okay. I said to her, does your family have ties to West Virginia? Yes. Does your family have ties to New York? Yes. What's your grandmother's name? Margaret. Her grandmother was one of the future generations.
Put the big, small.
That's cool. Yeah, and I mean that's a good story, and I think it's a really good story because what people have to understand, you know, just because somebody wants us to make contact with their grandmother, it doesn't always work that way. Their grandmother has to want to make contact with them too. You know, we can't always control who makes contact with us.
100%. I mean, I remember having another young lady who she was just open to whomever might want to connect to her. And my thought was, here comes Grandma. And I dive in and I do not get Grandma. I get this young man who had a very tragic story to tell. Find out at the end of the reading, this young man was her best friend, and it was the 1-year anniversary of his death. Then she looks at me and she says, honestly, I was hoping my grandma would come through. And I just started to laugh. I'm like, well, I thought she was going to, but then she was kind enough to step back and let this young man talk first. So there is no guarantee.
Right. I actually had somebody get mad at me. Like they wanted to fight me, physically fight me, because I couldn't get in contact with who they wanted me to. And I was like, well, this other person wants to talk to you. They're like, I don't want to talk to them. All right. Okay.
Then there's nothing more you can do. I mean, if they don't want to connect, they don't want to connect. Exactly. We can't force them.
Right.
I mean,
okay, so tell me one thing
that I'm living. If I don't want to talk to somebody, I'm not going to talk to them. I can't imagine that's going to change when I'm dead.
Right. I mean, especially now that I'm paranormal, you know, yeah, I'm only going to talk to who I want to. So, okay, so a few more questions. I'll let you go. So tell me one thing you think investigators do wrong or get wrong. What's one thing you think investigators get wrong?
I think
my most common answer
people get stuck in their ways. Like those who do things on the technical side and using equipment, they sometimes get rooted there. And those who do things from a more psychic perspective, they get rooted there. And I'm finding in recent years that when you blend those two methods, that to me leads to success. I mean, even for my own personal YouTube channel, Crooked Path Paranormal, my buddy Noah and I, who are the founders of this channel, his background was more technical and with equipment. My background, of course, is more as the psychic. And when we've blended that, and I've even opened up to using more of the equipment, he's opened up and learned to do things more psychically, we have phenomenal experiences. So I think getting rooted in just one method of investigation is something that many could do differently.
I agree with that. And actually, my most popular answer for most people is they rely too much on equipment. So, and I think equipment is important, but like you said, I think we use everything. I kind of use the equipment to correspond with what I already know. You know, especially if I'm doing a residential investigation. If I'm doing a residential investigation and I'm trying to help a family, it's a lot easier to go to them and be like, "This is what I caught," than it is to go to them and be like, "This is what was communicated with me." So, yeah, and I believe what we should always be learning. We should learn from each other. We should learn new techniques. We should just always be learning.
I agree.
All right, so rapid fire. You ready for rapid fire?
Yes.
All right, so demon or no demon?
No demon.
Spirit box or SS method?
Estes all the way.
Haunted house or haunted location?
Haunted location. History.
Residual or intelligent?
Intelligent.
Solo investigation or team investigation?
Team.
I'm the same way. I usually do a solo during the investigation, but I want my team there.
Absolutely.
Scariest places you've ever been?
Oh, that's a tough one because I don't scare very easily. The bats at Moundsville really got me. The bats just about did me in.
Your go-to piece of equipment?
Rods. Love dowsing rods.
Me too. I'm old school. My former co-host called me the OG of the paranormal field. I'm like, I've only been doing this for 34 years. That doesn't mean anything. But yeah, so I like the old school stuff. I mean, I got the new school stuff. I always tell people that I take the old school techniques and the new school technology. That's what.
Right. I love that.
So if you could ask the spirits one question, and get the truth, what would you ask?
I would want confirmation about their conscious decision to stay. We talked about that earlier. I believe they stay because they want to. I would want confirmation of that because that's been a big talking point in the years.
I believe that too, and I mean I agree with all that. 99.9%. I do want to go back and revisit the demon question.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and I say this respectfully, obviously, and as a friend. First of all, I want to say I've never seen a demon. Okay,
right.
But I can't say that there's not a possibility there are demons. I mean, I am trained as a demonologist, but that's just because I want to be educated. I am a very educated investigator. I actually have a degree in parapsychology.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a degree in theology, and I am a trained demonologist under Bishop Long. So I don't know. I can't say there's not demons. I can't say there is demons either. I will say that if there is demons, they're not what these 20-year-old kids in tight jeans are screaming about.
Right.
Does that
I
make
agree
sense?
with you. I agree with you completely. And that's why I answered the question the way I did.
Right. So if there is, I'm choking on air. If there is demons, first of all, from a history standpoint, because that's one thing that we have in common. We both love history. So from a history standpoint, everybody tries to say that demons are a Christian thing. Christian Catholics, they came up with them. But if you actually study history, they didn't use the name demon, but there's demonic entities dating back to the Aztec
right
civilization.
Right. Of course.
So what people have to understand, if there is demons, they are a non-human entity. So that's a big
my personal thought too is that if there are
the
demons,
people running around yelling demon all the time just so they can get more likes, if they ever ran into a demon, piss or pass.
Right. I personally feel that if there are demons, they're not sitting inside of an abandoned building waiting to wreak havoc and jump out at someone.
Right.
They're out in the real world where the people are. That's where they're going to cause their havoc.
Exactly. Demons have a lifetime. So they're patient. So why would they? So and demons, if they are demons, and then we're going to move on because I could discuss this all day. I'm telling you, if there are demons, just like spirits, ghosts make a conscious effort to be here, demons have to be invited in.
Right.
They can't just possess somebody because they can't just look like, oh, look, Chris is cute, I'm going to possess them. It doesn't work like that. They have to be invited in. Now, they can be invited. You can open the door, but you can open the door with drug abuse, depression, that kind of stuff can crack a door, but they still have to be invited.
Right.
So yeah. So I can say demon all the time, and I get 20 more likes on Facebook. But stop saying demon unless it is a demon. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. I absolutely agree.
So I got one more question, and then I've only asked this question like 2 other people, but I think it's a fascinating topic. Let's talk about haunted objects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is your take on haunted objects? I'm talking about. I guess the most common haunted object is haunted doors. We got Annabelle, we got Robert, blah blah blah. So, what is your take on haunted objects?
I do think it is possible for a spirit to take on an object. Notice the way I worded that. I didn't say an object to take on a spirit. I said for a spirit to take on an object. I worded that very deliberately. I also think that when it comes to an object being haunted, it might not always be a spirit. That object has been in a space. It's seen what has happened. It's absorbed the energy of what's happened. It all comes right back to energy. So what's attached to an object might not be an actual physical ghost. It might be energy. I think there's all kinds of things that can lead us toward objects being haunted in different ways.
So yeah, I pretty well agree with all that. So I was good friends with Dan Riviere.
Okay.
And the handler of Annabelle.
Yes.
I never got the pleasure of sitting down face to face with Dan, but we talked on the phone weekly, and not always about paranormal. We talked on the phone weekly. Sometimes it was about classic vehicles because that was Dan's other love. So when Dan passed away, surprisingly, I was actually supposed to meet him in person, face to face at Rock Island. So I almost didn't go to Rock Island because of how much Dan meant to me, if that makes sense. So
right.
I'm glad I went because it was also the first time that I met Rob and Sarah face to face. It was the first time I met Ernie and Denise face to face. There are so many people that I would have missed out. It was also the first time that I met like Wayne Kirby and all them face to face. But I say that because obviously me and Dan discussed this in detail, and me and Wayne Kirby have discussed this in detail. So their theory, their way of explaining it to me is Dan said, Dan was a very religious man, and so was Wayne. So Dan said that they don't believe that God would allow something to possess an object. But what can happen is exactly what you said. So most haunted objects are doors. So most doors are little girls' best friends, especially when they're little, especially if they're like sick. So that door absorbs all that energy. They absorb all those secrets. So eventually there's all this energy. So at what point does that energy become an entity of its own?
Right. An object becomes an egregore, so to speak.
Right. So yeah. And and I agree with all that. And it's another one of those things. Don't mess with it if you don't know what you're doing. You can do more damage than good if you don't know what you're doing. So here's a fun question. I don't think I've ever asked anybody this one, but it's a fun question. what is your take on Ouija boards?
I actually have my own personal branded Ouija board that I sell. I have 3 of them
That's
in my
awesome.
car at all times. They have different purposes. I mean, one is for only communicating with one particular spirit, one is for one particular location, and one is a little bit more general. I've got probably 30 of them in my office. I think they're great tools when used properly, just like any tool is great when used properly.
Exactly. And that's what I tell people. People are like blah blah blah. So for my, I do a Paracon myself. I call it a Paranormal Expo, but this will be my 4th year doing it. Last year, I actually had a guy from Scotland custom make me 2 Ouija boards, and all that stuff. And down here in Mayfield, everybody's still a good Christian, and I'm still Satan or whatever. And so I had people would be like, "Oh, you're opening Mayfield up to the." I'm like, it's just a tool. If used properly, it's fine. If you don't know what you're doing, leave it alone. But if it's used properly, it's fine. So real fast, and then we'll get into a closing segment. So this is a funny story about me, Chris. I'm going to tell you the story because it's funny. So my first introduction to a Ouija board was when I was 14. So this is 1988. Yes, I'm old, I know. So my youth leader's adopted daughter was, nowadays we would call them goth, but back in the 80s we didn't have any of that.
Right.
But she was hot. I mean, like Alyssa Milano in the 90s hot, and so she was having her sweet 16 birthday party, and she invited one boy, 14-year-old me, and so of course I went, and of course it was at the Executive Inn at Paducah, Kentucky, because that's where you had Sweet 16 parties. In you had it around the Olympic size swimming pool, and there was a stage and stuff. So anyway, we did the Ouija board. For me, it was, I knew how to use it, so it was a good communication. The Ouija board did not bother me. Now there was another experiment. I don't know what you want to call it. Ritual. That's a good ritual. There was another ritual that she had us participate in. And it's the only time in my life that I was freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared. And I don't scare easily. Even at 14, I didn't scare easily. I'm a child of violence. I grew up in an abusive home, drug and alcohol fueled. My normal life is hell to everybody else. So I do not scare easy. And so I can't tell you exactly how the ritual goes. I can tell you the name. I can't tell you that. It was called 13 Doors and 13 Staircases. And you lay down head to head, and you made the outline of a house.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had like staircases, and you had like doors. And so basically you was opening a portal. I mean, let's be serious. That was basically what, and of course with my abilities, I'm already always open to communication anyway.
Right.
So I didn't know that then. I know that now. So when it got to me, there was 3 knocks on the door. The 3's significant. So there's 3 knocks on the door, and the entity that answered my door is not one I would like to deal with again. So that's really all I got to say about that. Don't play with stuff unless you know what you're doing.
Right.
So
for sure.
All right. So we're in the closing segment now. So tell everybody where they can find you. Social media and all that stuff.
There's a number of places you can find me. Facebook, Christopher Lee Jansen. Patreon, The Paranormal Medium. I offer writings about my experiences on there, as well as a monthly 1-card reading for my subscribers. And probably one of the biggest parts of my work right now is my YouTube channel, Crooked Path Paranormal on YouTube.
Okay, your books get ready to come out. Was it going to be available at?
It'll be available through my website, crookedpathparanormal.com. I'll have it available on all my social media, on Patreon. There'll be some other venues out there too, but I'm slowly revealing those things to my Patreon subscribers. So there's certain things I can't say until I've told them, because I promised them they'd be the first to know.
And of course, you do appearances. You got any appearances coming up soon?
I do. I'll be a special guest at FCICon, MadCon, and ISSCon. Of course, I'm one of the founders of the Cleveland Paracon coming up the second weekend of September, along with Steph Pitts of Haunted Havens. That's going to be a big one this year. So I've got lots of stuff.
That's what me and Kenneth Drake was talking about. He said that he would be there and he would see you there. We were talking
Absolutely.
Because he's relocated. He now lives in Indianapolis, Indiana. So
Okay.
So I'm going to throw this out here. Nothing to worry about until next year. But this touch bases, and maybe next year you can be part of the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. Next year I'm going big because it's year 5. So I'm going big. And
Excellent.
So
I actually spend a lot of time in Kentucky, so that I'd love that.
Yeah. So far, I guess you're going. This is the first time I'm announcing this publicly, so you get to be the first one who hears it. So far, we have 2 confirmed guests for next year already. Yes, we got Dale Munson, the co-lead investigator at Ghost Hunters, and then we got Kenneth Drake. So that's who we. So far, that's who we got. So
fantastic. That's awesome.
And this year, just for everybody that wants to know, this year we have Aaron G. Thompson, we have the Wind of Rose, we have Outlaw Paranormal, we got the 222 podcast, we got Reynolds, from wherever he's from, and then we got Jen Jacob. She's our cryptozoologist lady, and for the first time, like I said, this is year 4, and for the first time, we even have a UFO person this year. So nice. I'm excited about it. It's and for the people that's in my area, it's only $15 all day. You can come and go as you want. You get a wristband. You come and go as you want. We got 6 speakers, 45 vendors, and 2 food trucks. So come on down.
Sounds great.
And all right. So thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm excited. This year was our biggest year, and we had 300 people show. And I'll post this, so I'll send you a link so you can share it, and I'll figure out what's going on with Facebook before next week. Facebook's always having some issues. So So for everybody, my planned guest for next week is Jen Jacobs. We'll talk Dogman, and we will talk more about the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. So let's see. Here we go. Play.